Hello and welcome to Hamer Reviews. My name's Christopher Hamer and today we're at the Nikon NPS Z9 Experience Day, where I have been hands-on with the Z9 for all of the day in fact, and finally I'm able to put together a sort of first taste, first impressions video of the Z9. So I'm really pleased to say that it hasn't disappointed me in terms of what my expectations were and the device that we've ended up with. The Z9 is an improvement on every aspect of the Z series that we've seen so far. We have 8K video, we have up to 120 frames per second if you're willing to drop down to 11 megapixels. The sensor itself is a 45.7 megapixel sensor. It will run all the way from 32 to 102,400 ISO. We're talking some serious capabilities in a pretty standard professional sized camera. I love the fact that Nikon has taken a lot of the, let's say, criticism of the prior Z series cameras and has indeed learned from those criticisms, and we have one of the best autofocus systems I have used to date. Now, some of you that might have watched my previous reviews have probably seen that I rate the R5. EOS R5 from Canon quite highly. I really enjoyed the autofocus system. I felt it was on point. Now, don't get me wrong, I'm comparing an EOS R5 with a Z9. That's not a fair comparison. The real comparison would be the R3, I think, versus this. But the fact of the matter is that Nikon's finally at least caught up, and I think in some ways actually exceeded the competition. So I've had a huge amount of fun using pretty much every Z mount lens that I hadn't touched so far. So the 100 to 400, the 400 2.8 TC Z lens, which I have video on as well, so make sure you subscribe and don't miss that. The return of 3D tracking, I think, is going to be something that's really important to a lot of Nikon DSLR shooters. Now, I do think that all area autofocus has come an extremely long way, but the fact of the matter is that for many shooters coming directly from the D5, D6, 3D is part of how they've shot so far. It is one of the Nikon sort of standard systems for autofocus, and it's great to see its return on the Z9. So when I was shooting with this camera, I have to say the thing that impressed me most was the autofocus tracking in 3D mode was fantastic. The autofocus tracking in all area mode was fantastic. It's just really good to see that Nikon has developed their autofocus systems, and we now have a system that certainly can go up against the best that Canon and I believe also Sony has to offer. In terms of the camera itself, I'm not going to run through every single spec. I'm sure you've watched more than enough videos, but some of the things I've noticed while using it today that I really like. Ergonomics, this is fabulous. It's the only way I can really put it. If I think about the D3, I really enjoyed the feel of that. It kind of reminds me of that, but I having picked up a D6 as well, you can definitely see the design language there. They're very similar. So it feels great in the hand. I love the vertical grip. I like the fact that they've thought of certain things that I haven't seen before. So the actual playback button is now on the bottom right of the camera, which is kind of an odd place, but it means that you can press it equally easily whether you are in portrait or landscape orientations with the camera. Really nice touch. The actual monitor on the back, I really enjoy the fact that it tilts all the way out, but also has this side flipping mode. Don't get me wrong, it would have been really nice to see Nikon put a full tilt flip screen, but we can't have everything we want. To be frank, I think that this is a really good solution. It's sort of not the best of both worlds, but it's definitely not a criticism from my part. I like all the technology this has built in, and a lot of that is from the pro cameras that we've seen, such as the D6, but I mean, built-in GPS is great. An Ethernet port on the side again. I think the D6 and some of the other D series have that, but nice to see that if you're shooting sports or so on. Full-size HDMI port, and I think that is kind of the statement of intent around this is video. Having 8K on here, I personally think at the moment is kind of a bit of a gimmick, and the only reason I say that is I don't know anyone with an 8K TV. But then again, if you're creating content now, there's no reason you shouldn't be shooting in 8K, so that in the future you can indeed provide your content in 8K, or just to give you more possibilities for cropping later in post-production. It's something that I do sometimes when I shoot 4K and then produce 1080p content. It does give you a bit of headroom, and perhaps that is a reason why you may want to shoot 8K with this. I had a small play with 8K video. I'm gonna actually get my hands on the Z9 for a bit longer soon, and I'll really do some proper video tests, but my initial impression is very good. The other things that I thought I'd mention that were kind of curious, it's nice to see the flash sync port and the 10-pin connector make a return. I have to admit, I didn't think we'd see them on this camera, so kind of cool that that's there. I like the fact that this has a USB-C port and USB-C power delivery compatibility, so you can actually charge this fairly quickly, bearing in mind that the EN-EL18D is a fairly hefty battery. From a battery bank or from a USB charger. I think that nowadays we're seeing less and less cameras, chargers sort of being used, because the fact of the matter is that USB-C is just that much more easy and accessible. As you'd also expect, we have the same microphone and headphone ports, kind of standard, not a huge surprise. And on the back you have all the professional controls you could want, dedicated buttons for white balance quality, dedicated buttons for mode and shutter mode, and flash and bracketing on the top, your shutter type selector. I mean, this is very reminiscent of all the Nikon Pro cameras I've used, and that's not a bad thing. I don't think they needed to redesign the wheel here because they already had a great system, so it's good to see Nikon making more use of that. Coming back to some of the things I liked about the camera, the various different shutter modes were very good. 20 frames per second is pretty crazy, if I'm honest with you. 20 frames per second, RAW and JPEG fine, no problem at all. I found myself mostly shooting in 12 and 15 because I was just filling memory cards here and there and everywhere. Not for no reason, but there wasn't actually a benefit to me. I know though there are sports photographers out there that will really like the fact that they have 20 frames per second. In fact, you can shoot 30 frames per second if you just drop things down a little bit. And again, as I mentioned at the start, 120 frames per second if you're wanting to go for 11 megapixel images. That is absolutely mind-blowing to me. In terms of storage medium, this will be no great surprise to anyone. CF Express, dual card slots. It's pretty much the standard now. It's very much the replacement for Compact Flash Express Type B. Very good cards. I think they've become a lot more affordable now. There are recommendations if you shoot 8K video to buy certain specs of cards, and in fact obviously you'll benefit if you're shooting at those super high frame rates as well. But personally, I think something like the Angelbird 512GB SE cards cost around £200. Fantastic value, give you a lot of shooting time, and I had no issues with that card today whatsoever, even shooting 20 frames per second. I never filled the buffer. Don't get me wrong, I wasn't sitting here holding down the shutter button trying to fill the buffer. I'll save that for when I have my full review. But yeah, no, initially that was no problem. In terms of balance, this camera balances well. It's heavy, obviously, so with a light 24 to 120mm lens, the f4Z version that I've got on here now, obviously it's very much the camera, you don't really feel the lens, but with the 400 2.8 TC edition, yes, you certainly notice it, but it is well balanced. It feels good in the hand. You also get 3 function buttons on the front. That's rather nice. Extra function button on the side here. Not quite sure how you'd use that. I was kind of wondering about what the ergonomic plan was for that. It's maybe one of the few things that I didn't really get on this camera, but yeah, that's not a major issue from my side. So for £5,300, you're buying a professional camera. This doesn't, to me, feel something that a lot of hobbyists can necessarily afford unless you have very deep pockets. For me personally, I think the Z9's probably outside of my budget for a while, and I'm going to continue shooting with the Z6 II, which I've been pretty happy with, to be honest. But I think, although it's expensive now, I cannot wait to see these technologies filter down into the other cameras that Nikon produces in the future. I'm even hoping, I may be in a minority here, but I'm hoping we also still see a Nikon update for the Z6 II. Maybe some improved autofocus based on the algorithms used in the Z9. You never know. I'm kind of hopeful still. I lie, I kind of lost hope, but I am happy with my Z6 II, so that's fine. The last thing I'll just mention is the ISO performance, because I had some really interesting conversations with other professional photographers here today at the NPS event, and one of the things that really struck me and I did find particularly interesting was that for very low light performance, this isn't necessarily the right camera for them. They're still going to stick with something like a D6, but I think overall everyone agreed that the ISO performance is generally very good. It's just very low light situations, this might not be the perfect camera at this stage. But equally, we also need to wait for, and this is a point that one of the Nikon representatives made, we need to wait for people like Adobe to catch up and actually give us full support for the Z9, because that may allow you to get a little bit more out of those raw files as well. At the moment, as I understand it, editing a Z9 file in Lightroom doesn't produce fantastic results, but using Nikon software or something like Capture One will give you better results. So that's something to keep in mind as well. Overall, the Z9 I am really impressed by. I obviously can't get past the slight sticker shock of £5,300, which is a lot of money for a camera, but if it is a professional tool that you're using day in, day out, with a level of weather sealing, the absolute amazing build quality, this does feel like one of those cameras that you could nail into a wall with and the camera would be fine. I do think that for professionals, this is kind of a no-brainer. And I think for those people that are on the cusp of doing both stills and video, this continues to be a really viable option if you can get hold of one. And I wouldn't necessarily say to someone, if you're shooting video, maybe look at some of the other brands, because, you know, Nikon's still catching up. They've quite clearly caught up at this stage, and it's great to see. I won't lie, I am a fan of Nikon, and I'm very pleased to see that Nikon is succeeding in that way and is producing some fantastic cameras with really nice development seen throughout the Z series. So I can't wait to see what they bring out next. So thank you very much for watching my slight rambling monologue, but I was just so excited to get my hands on the Z9. Had to shoot a short video here. I'll endeavor to get the 400 2.8 TC video up pretty soon as well, because I think that's a phenomenal piece of kit, and fingers crossed you'll watch that too. So thank you very much for watching. If you have any questions about the Z9, actually genuinely, if you have any questions or want to know anything that or test something in particular, let me know, because I do have one of these coming for a longer term. I've rented it out towards the middle of April. So if you have any questions, let me know, and I'll try my best to test out or do some tests and let you know of any results in that video. Until the next time though, thank you very much for watching. Give this video a thumbs up, and if you haven't already, please do subscribe, as it really does help me out. But I do hope I see you again next time. Goodbye.